This is Hidden Killers Week in Review.
A look back at the most prolific stories of the week.
You're listening to the Hidden Killers podcast with Tony Brueski.
Featuring attorney, guest, and former felony prosecutor Eric Faddis.
The trial of Chad Daybell, it keeps getting deeper and deeper. The defense out there pleading their case. And we're hearing testimony from people that we have never heard from before, never heard from in Lori Vallow's trial because, well, they didn't need to testify then. These are people that are trying to stand up for Chad. And Chad happens to be their dad. It's a lot of his kids that have taken the stand in the last week or so. Very compelling testimony. I don't know how accurate a lot of it really is. It's, I believe, probably their perception being that it is their dad. You don't want your dad to be this monster. But, you know, that's all up for conjecture. Joining me, Eric Faddis, former prosecutor and defense attorney. What's been your takeaways thus far of that week of testimony from the kids?
You know, my takeaway is that the family of Chad Daybell has done a reasonably good job at protecting and supporting their family, Chad Daybell. And you know, I think that, especially in terms of the Tammy Daybell charge, the allegation that Chad killed his wife, Tammy, I think the defense scored some points on that when they were kind of describing how Tammy had declining health and she was taking some supplements that could be problematic. So I think they scored some points on that piece. For the other two charges regarding the stepchildren who were killed, I'm not sure they've had as much traction.
Yeah, I would agree there. I mean, nobody wants to believe that your dad had a role in killing your mom, especially if on the surface and what they were seeing was a happy household. I mean, however that is defined in terms of Chad Daybell land, I don't know. But it seems to them they were all kind of in a good place. I mean, have you ever seen a case where the children testify and if they were not abused by their father or who was ever being charged, turn their back on dad or mom if they did something horrible to somebody else?
You know, it reminds me of two cases. When we look at the Lori Vallow Daybell case, she had a son. His name always is
Colby Ryan.
Perhaps. What's that?
Colby Ryan.
Yep, that's the one. And so he sort of turned on his mom.
True.
In terms of that case. But then you look at the Suzanne Morphew and Barry Morphew case in Colorado, my home state. Mm-hmm. Barry Morphew's children have been steadfast in his support. Mm-hmm. And so I think it kind of runs the gamut on that, but always interested to see how the family's going to react to these explosive allegations regarding their parent.
That is true. I wasn't even thinking that. On the opposite side, Colby Ryan did very much turn on mom. I think he eventually saw the facts and couldn't really necessarily dispute them. Obviously, two totally different upbringings as well. Let's listen to Chad's daughter refuting that her mother, really was in such good health, as we've heard the prosecution try to say. She's kind of going back and saying, no, not so much the case.
Were there other things that your mother did in terms of remedies to resolve other issues she may have had?
She bruised really easily, and she used arnica gel.
Okay.
Arnica is a plant that helps with bruising. She had it in gel form.
And when you say she bruised easily, can you elaborate on that?
If she were to bump her hip on the counter when she was walking by, she would get a massive bruise from that. Even things like carrying a heavier load of groceries where the bag pressed on her arm would leave a bruise.
At any time were you present when your mother discussed any of her health issues with other members of the school staff?
Any chance that I got to, I would go visit her in her classroom. And I never observed her talking about her health with our coworkers.
I want to talk a little bit about the book fair on the 18th and the preparations that were involved. Did you personally observe anything as far as your mother preparing for the book fair?
She loaded her personal belongings in boxes and loaded them heavier than perhaps she should have, because I observed her walking down the hallway and she was resting the box against her body on her arms, holding it back and walking with a lot of effort.
Did your mother participate in that 5K race?
She did not.
There was a discussion about some previous testimony about someone observing her. I believe it was a principal observing her crossing the finish line. Do you have any personal observations about what you saw that day?
My mother may have walked across the finish line while helping with the race administration. She was not entered as a participant, and she did not go the entire distance. There were some people at the end of the race who were going very slowly, and a group of people walked with them to encourage them to finish. And she may have been with that group, although I don't remember seeing her.
Very, I would say, robotic, almost like testimony. These are people who I think have been trained not to question a whole hell of a lot of anything, and we'll listen to some more clips in a moment. What do you think? Did she poke some holes in the testimony of the prosecution here, or is this really just, I mean, like I said, kind of robotic testimony from someone who's been trained not to question anything?
Yeah, I'm kind of underwhelmed by at least that clip. One thing that comes to mind not only is like you said, she's been trained not to question anybody, but it seemed kind of rehearsed too. In that, I'm wondering if the legal team sort of really had some involvement with her preparation when she's talking about the book fair stuff. She's sort of describing, and my mom's body was positioned this way, and this is where she was holding the box, and this is how she was holding it, and this is how she was moving. It just seemed like it's something that the attorney was like, hey, make sure you mention all these small details because they're helpful.
Exactly. And talk as monotone as you can with no personality whatsoever. It's like
that part too.
Kind of creepy. It's a little bit creepy. I think even Alexa has, great, I said that out loud, has a little more candor to the tone.
Want to listen ad-free? Want advanced access to all of our interviews before anyone else?
Become a True Crime Today Premium Plus subscriber on Apple Podcasts.
You get every episode commercial free.
So you can binge on true crime
until you can binge no more.
Search True Crime Today Premium Plus on Apple Podcasts now, or go to our podcast page and sign up now.
More of the Hidden Killers podcast next.